What's up, non-believers, doubters, and skeptics? Today's podcast features Will Thorpe, aka Heretical Theology on Instagram. Will's become a close friend of mine over the last year or so, as we are both content creators in the ex-Christian atheist space. And we talk about deconstruction. We talk about navigating relationships with believers. We talk about atheists that we have to block on social media. Today's episode is brought to you by patreon.com/JesusUnfollower. If you want to get episodes of the podcast before anyone else, or if you just want to support what I'm doing, the YouTube channel, the podcast, you can do so at patreon.com/JesusUnfollower. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the episode with Will Thorpe, aka Heretical Theology. Will the Thrill Thorpe. How you doing, man?
Doing great, Kevin.
You know, I started this podcast to just kind of be relatable for people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And to kind of be able to relate to people who are going through deconstruction and shit. And I wanted to start having guests on just to show people that atheists, agnostics, people who don't believe in God aren't these bad people or weird. We're normal just like everybody else. We just don't believe in something supernatural like that that's guiding and controlling our lives, you know?
Right. No, it's good. It's good that you do that. I think I might make that a little bit difficult for you at times with how much of an asshole I can be to some people, but you know, hey.
Hey, it's more fun. It's more fun to be an asshole sometimes. So I saw you just got back from Disney again.
Yeah, we went to, so we were supposed to have the marathon weekend this weekend, which was obviously canceled. So Disney decided to do it virtually, which is the thing to do with all these races nowadays. I decided not to do it virtually because you're basically just forcing yourself to run a marathon by
that's kind of
yourself.
weird.
And then they literally just mail you a medal. I'm like, that's not fun at all. But I was actually kind of happy the marathon got canceled because I was having a lot of health problems. I had a couple herniated discs in my neck and other health issues, and I wasn't feeling amazing this weekend anyways as it was. So, hey, I'm totally okay for it. But yeah, so we kept our reservations, and we hooked up with a lot of our friends in the Run Disney community, and it was just a really great time.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Life in your 30s is fun, isn't it? The health issues.
Can't wait till I'm 40. Good God.
I know, man. I'm closing in on it. I'm 37. Closing in
really?
on 40. Yep.
No, I thought you were
not far away. What's that?
I thought you were younger than me for some reason.
Really? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
New Year's resolution for me is working on my health for sure. I don't know if I'll be running any marathons or anything, but physical health, mental health, all that stuff, you know.
Yeah. No, health is important. That's, if anything, since becoming an atheist, since my health has become a much higher priority than it was when I was a Christian, and it was pretty high then too. So.
Yeah, I saw that you made a post about fitness and kind of like how it went along with your deconstruction journey. You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, so I think, you know, when you're at church and you're experiencing worship and you got those endorphins, you know, it kind of makes you feel good. Like there's just a lot of feel good stuff that goes along with it. You know, you're hearing music and it's affecting you and things like that. And I was noticing that as I got healthier, I was starting to run more, starting to have these, you know, more strenuous exercises, and eventually it came to a point where I actually enjoy running. Imagine that, right? And I would have, yeah, exactly. And I would legitimately, now I would still do my morning devotions. Like I would wake up at 4 a.m. like a psychopath, have my coffee, open my Bible, have 10 minutes of prayer time, half hour of reading the Bible time, journal, and then hit the road and be out doing my miles. And that was what I did for a couple of years, actually. And then I started realizing that as I was deconstructing, that there had to be some sort of chemical, biological thing that happens in my mind with the weight loss and with the exercise that kind of opened my mind to have, I guess, open to more experiences. I hate using that term, but I definitely think there was some sort of chemical things happening in my mind that was like, okay, there's probably more to this what I think there is. And then I was realizing that as I'm listening to, and I actually had this realization specifically. I don't know if I was already a non-Christian or if I was almost like right there as a non-Christian. But I was
Somewhere in the
listening.
gray area.
Yeah, I was listening to. I think it's Led Zeppelin, Valhalla. That's the theme song to Thor Ragnarok, and I think that's who it is. So forgive me if I don't know my music correctly. But it's just like a super intense song, and it's great. And I think about like Thor literally getting like, amped up on his electricity. I'm like, yeah, it was like a major endorphin rush. And I'm like, and it was actually during the middle of a thunderstorm too, which was even better. And it was just an amazing experience. And I'm like, oh shit, like this is almost identical, if not more impressive than what I experienced when I'm at worship. And I'm not trying to, you know, imagine these things. These things are just coming to my mind as is already. And like I said, it was identical to what I experienced during worship. And that was kind of a big realization that, okay, there's definitely more to this, or a lot less to the Christian side of things than what I'm actually making it out to be.
Yeah, they set the atmosphere with the music and the lighting and the fucking smoke machines. Some of them,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
just try to get your brain into a certain state, and that's so true, man. That's cool that you made that connection, because I think there's a lot of truth to that. Churches can kind of manipulate. I've been in services where it's like the preacher will never even make it to the stage, or whatever you call it, but because everybody starts worshiping and stuff because they play a certain songs in a certain order, and the Holy Spirit just happens to hit just right, and so then everybody's
Imagine
just
that.
worshiping, and pastor's making easy money. He doesn't ever even has to get up there and do his job.
Gotta follow the Holy Spirit, man.
For sure. Let God lead the service was what they would say,
Yes.
Holy Spirit's taking over this service.
Yeah. Oh boy, that's fun stuff. Excuse me.
So I know you've probably told your deconstruction story several times, but if you want to do just a quick run through of quick overview or whatever of recap of your deconstruction.
Yeah, sure. Where do I have? Oh, I have my coffee somewhere. My coffee's gone. It was already almost empty, anyways. Yeah. So real quick, was raised. First went to church when I was about 5 years old. Small rural church, Methodist church. My mother says I was saved when I was 7 at that church. I don't remember it. I'll take your word for it. When I was about 12 years old, at my high school in this rural town in Preble County, Ohio. Literally, there's just cornfields everywhere. My class had 100 people in it. The entire high school had 400. Less than that, actually. Small town. Then there was a church. They didn't have a church, and so they were actually meeting inside one of the lecture halls at our school. And they had free food and cute girls. So I was curious, checked it out. Like, oh, I've never heard any of this stuff before, because the Methodist church I was going to was very liturgical and pretty standard old school Methodist. They sang all the hymns and things like that. So I found that this all very interesting. Of course, they're studying Revelation, specifically the book of. Well, they're studying end times, so they were studying the book of Daniel on Wednesdays, and then they're studying Revelation on Sundays, and connecting the evangelical Revelation dots together. So that was how I got pulled into evangelicalism. Was saved at 14 at abstinence camp. Resaved. Heard of God, tapped me on the shoulder, and all that good stuff.
Did you say abstinence camp?
Yep, abstinence camp.
I don't think I've ever heard of that before.
Yeah, so it was actually a church camp I used to go to over the summer. And so they would have these weekend retreats, and they're abstinence camps for high schoolers to go to teach you how to keep in your pants until you're married. that's what they did. And then they did a gospel presentation, of course, too, which I still have it. So it was actually like a painting. We didn't know what it was. It was like this huge canvas. It has nothing to do with abstinence, but it was at abstinence camp. But this painter had music, and we're all trying to figure out like what is this person painting. It was very large, abstract, and we thought it might be like a globe of the earth or something. And then she splattered red paint on it. And then as soon as she splattered red paint, you instantly know it's Jesus. I was like, oh my gosh, and it was very emotional.
Oh yeah,
yeah. I still have a picture of that painting, which was kind of fascinating because it was a pretty important point in my life. Fast forward, turns out the church I was going to ended up being a little bit of a cult. Imagine that they could never keep more than a couple hundred people in it. I think right now they're down to 50. I think at the peak they're up to like 300 people before the church split. Wow. My wife didn't particularly care for the church very much, and of course I've been going there for 15 years now. She started not liking the church, and then so we started looking around for other churches. Couldn't find a church in our hometown. This is up in Ohio. Literally looked for like a 30-mile radius, checking out all the churches' websites. Couldn't find a single doctrine that I could agree with. if that tells you anything. Then,
were there a lot of churches around there?
Oh yeah. There's some.
But you just couldn't find one that you really
it's just like
with.
It's just there's like a certain standard set of doctrines that I had to agree to before I would even consider moving to a new church. And then on top of that, God will have to call me to that church because that's what I believed. Went down to here in Florida to visit my brother. Found out my brother had become a Christian, and so we visited his church. My wife was very excited about this. And I told her very clearly, we're not switching churches, especially to this huge mega church of 10,000 people. Like, that's just, no, you cannot go to a mega church because clearly they don't speak truth. It's amazing how every church says that every other church doesn't really speak the truth, especially the bigger ones.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's wild. Exactly. So my wife came to church. She prayed. She doesn't normally pray a lot. At least at that point she didn't. And God told her, hey, suck it up. It's going to be okay. And she had peace about it. So we went to the church. I had no intentions on even asking any questions about the church. Then my pastor, or the pastor there, who was giving the sermon, said, hey, we believe this, we believe this, and we believe this. And answering all these really random questions that I did not even think would be possible to even be addressed during the sermon. So eventually I took that as God calling us to this church, and God and I had a nice little conversation. So we moved 1,000 miles to Florida because we felt God calling us to this church. And I'm skipping over a lot of details here. Okay, there's a lot more than just that, I can assure you.
Yeah.
So we acted on faith. God called us to this new church because that's what he wanted us to do. Didn't have any jobs. And so we found jobs, which is awesome. But then we started deconstructing because I went to Peru on a mission trip, and God essentially failed my wife. She had taken she deals with separation anxiety from when I was in Iraq, and God was supposed to help provide for her to be okay. She was definitely not okay, to say the least. So she started a downward spiral before I did. She started going to a lot of biblical counselors at that church, which also weren't actually counselors. They were just, typically older ladies
trying to steer you back into the right direction.
Right. And so they're basically just older ladies who just knew the Bible, and my wife knew the Bible more than what they did.
Yeah,
because of our cult church, and started learning a lot about biblical history. I want to ask a lot of questions. My wife was essentially an atheist at this point, and I was getting really concerned. And so I tried to understand her, and I tried to figure out, hey, what is up with this biblical canon? What's going on here? How did the Bible become the Bible? Just started learning a crap ton of things that I had never heard at any other church, whether it be my cult church or my mega church I was attending. And one thing led to another. I became a very liberal, progressive Christian. I eventually realized that the Bible was not infallible. It was not perfect. It had very errant, very human. I deconstructed the idea of the Old Testament entirely. I just basically thought it was a load of shit. But I
Mhm.
still believe Jesus was God in some way, shape, or form, and that he had these good ideas. And if you do these good ideas and whatever is in this afterlife, then we will basically be all the better for it. I deconstructed the idea of hell. And then after I deconstructed the idea of hell, it wasn't too much longer. I'm like, well, what is the point of Jesus? And if he didn't die for our sins, and so what is he now protecting us from?
Yeah.
I was then relying on C.S. Lewis's 3 L's, Lord, Liar, or Lunatic, and that's when, thanks to Hitchens, learned that, hey, there's a fourth option, and that his followers came up with a legend about him. And when I look at the biblical church history, I find out that's actually more than likely what happened, because the Gospels were written so much later than what we think they were. And
Yep.
Paul was writing just a couple of decades after Jesus, as opposed to multiple decades after Jesus' death. And after that, I basically, in a prayer at work, very weepily, because I can be pretty emotional and very sentimental at times, I literally wrote down on a post-it note that, God, I can't call myself a Christian any longer, and I am now an agnostic. And I told my mom, I told my dad, and I told my brother. And my brother's like, well, as long as you're not an atheist, we should be okay. I'm like, okay. I didn't really understand what an atheist was at that time. And when I learned what an atheist actually was, I thought I knew. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I am an atheist after all. And that took about a whole month to figure out. And went through my angsty atheist phase about last January through March. And that's when I started Heretical Theology about a little over a year ago, and wasn't really sure what I was doing with that. I was basically giving Bible sermons to atheists, and that really didn't really seem to fly very well with a lot of people for some reason.
Yeah, your deconstruction was kind of public, well, you were posting like your devotionals and stuff, and a lot of your questions on Facebook, right, as you were going through it.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for bringing it. That's actually some important context. So I had been reading the Bible every day for multiple years straight. I think over a course of maybe 3 or 4 years, I think I might have missed like a couple of weeks total. And so in 2018, I was making my devos public for everyone to see, and it's been really fascinating because I get to see them again now because I got to see them last year. You can literally see me starting to ask these questions when I'm reading these texts, because I'm trying to analyze it critically. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but that's what I was doing. And then when I learned about Bart Ehrman and the historical critical method, like, this is exactly what I was doing. I'm like, oh, it only took me 20 years to start asking these types of questions. Okay, great. I'm finally learning something. And so finally, by the time November rolls around, I basically made it public that, because I felt like I have over 1,000 friends on Facebook, most of them Christians, most of them reading my stuff, and over the last couple of months, they are starting to see, like, wait, what? This doesn't really sound kosher,
right?
Evangelical wise. And some people were starting to ask some questions, and finally, I came out as an agnostic public on Facebook, because I felt like that needed to be said. Because if I'm talking about the Bible and they all think I'm a Christian, they should probably know the truth and that I'm not actually a Christian. Within a couple months, I lost over 500 friends on Facebook.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty crazy, because everyone I knew was a Christian,
Yeah.
And finally,
you think that was because people didn't want to question themselves? Like, do you think probably some people were like, he's asking too many questions, let's get rid of him? Or they just were like, they viewed you as the enemy now?
There is definitely some of that. Reading some of my posts, I was definitely angsty as fuck. I could have calmed down a lot. I had a chip on my shoulder. I was pissed. I was confused.
Rightfully so.
And so it's like there's a lot of atheists that go through that a lot of deconstructing Christians who become atheists or agnostic, whatever, that go through that super anger phase.
Yep.
And I did, and I'm just angsty in general. I'm an angsty person. I get really passionate about stuff, and I get pissy, and fragile white male ego and everything else. And yep. So
I feel you, man.
It's solid. It's the truth. If there's, I
see it come out every now and then when you get certain comments on Instagram. I love it though.
I'm like, yeah, I love it.
I love the fire.
Yeah. So when I realized that there's just mostly people just don't want to hear this crap, that's when I started Heretical Theology. I just basically moved. So I was posting these things on Instagram, on my personal Instagram page, which is now pretty much just me posting a workout selfie every other week. It's pretty much dead.
Yeah.
So I moved from there to my new Heretical Theology account, and then when I realized that there was such a cool niche group of deconstructing Christians like myself who could really use this information, that the same information I discovered, I'm like, hey, all right, I'm going to stop basically preaching at atheists, and that's a really weird word to say, because there was a lot of atheists who have a lot of misguided understanding, or have a lot of misunderstandings about the Bible, and I
Right.
was going to go and correct them, which is stupid in general. Like that shouldn't be my mission. But I still found it fascinating, and when I realized that there were Christians who are deconstructing, I'm like, yeah, I wanted to say, hey, your pain and your questions are legitimate, and here's why. And so instead of becoming angsty atheist Will, I became, hey, try to help each other and support each other Will.
Yeah, man, the deconstruction community on Instagram is a lot bigger than I really ever thought it was going to be. And it's
Right.
the same thing for me when I started my account. I had just gotten out of a relationship with a Seventh-day Adventist girl, and because of religion, and so I was like, I'm going to start an account and just make some. I was just planning to make some memes about religion and let out a little bit of frustration, because somebody I loved, we just broke up because I didn't believe in God, and so I'm like, so I wanted to start talking about it somewhere, and so I did it there, and then it sort of turned into something I never really thought it was going to be. This big community of other people who are either have just left Christianity or are questioning it, going through it. It's crazy, but there are some great people there.
Yeah, it's been really cool to connect with people like you, and I know we got some hardcore atheists that we have in our core group, but even
Yeah,
even like those who are still kind of like, I won't call them pseudo Christians, but they don't, labels can be kind of weird sometimes. It's been kind of cool listening to them,
for sure.
and there's just a lot of other amazing people who are self-prescribed Christians, and that's when I realized that my goal isn't to make more atheists. My goal is to get people who are in evangelical Christianity, especially fundamentalist Christianity, which there's not a whole lot of difference between the two, in my opinion, and to get them in a safer environment, and mentally, psychologically, physically, to where they can think critically, but also have kind of like the autonomy. Yeah, the autonomy, is that the right word? Basically, to
Yeah,
become self-aware of the world around them, and that their worldview is not the only worldview, and then
yeah,
they can make these. They have all the variables that the church intentionally or ignorantly withholds from them. They can get this information and then make the decision themselves.
yeah. It's all about being more skeptical, right? Um,
Right.
it's not about trying to deconvert anyone. I say that too. I'm not actively trying to, haha, I got another one to leave their faith. It's not like that. It's
Right.
just about, you want people to, if they're going to believe something, believe it for a good reason, and not
Mm-hmm.
just because. It's like you said, you were saved at 7 and stuff. So many of us just believe it so young, and it's just ingrained in us so young,
Mm-hmm.
and you grow up and you never really question. You don't really question why you believe. And
No, you're
then
right.
if nobody really learned about religion until they were an adult, I think we would have a very different world. You know what I
Right.
mean? People wouldn't just grow up believing something, and it's just amazing how the people in your area happen to all believe the right thing, or the people in your church all happen to believe the right thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. The big thing for me was certainty, and that was a big key word last year. And trying to, when talking with evangelical Christians, is that, and myself, was I was so certain I knew the truth, and when that certainty, which was heavily involved in the inerrancy of the Word of God, and that Word of God being the Bible, when there was a crack in that foundation, there was a lot of other crap that fell along with it. Um, it didn't make me an atheist. It made me a more liberal Christian, a more progressive Christian, or whatever you want to call it. But my goal is to get people to realize that like faith and certainty cannot coexist. Like they are complete opposites. And it took me a long time to figure that out.
For sure. That's a good point.
And it was strange too. Like I would even tell you, like I became the most mature Christian right before I started like uphill. Like I felt like my faith was like growing and growing as I challenged it. And there's a lot of Christians who stay there. That's fine. That's great. As long as you're not using religion to harm other people, then we're cool. But for me, I couldn't stay there. It was way too top heavy and way too much of a balancing act for me. And I fell over, and so for me, I couldn't maintain that faith.
Yeah, I think some people need it. You know what I mean? Some people need to feel like there's something bigger than themselves, and that's fine. I'm fine with that. And like you said, it's just as long as what you're believing isn't harming other people, I don't really have a problem with it. It's not like we hate Christians and stuff. It's just such a common misconception that we have a problem with Christianity in general. And maybe sometimes I generalize too much when I'm talking about Christianity. I think we're all guilty of it, but so I'm trying to be a little more specific about the groups of people within Christianity that I'm talking about. But yeah, if you're a Christian, I don't really generally have a problem with it, with what you believe. Do you still have any contact with the people from your old churches, like the cult church and stuff?
Not the cult church. I've attempted. Most of those attempts go horribly wrong. There are some who. So like, there's this one lady. I won't use her name, but she got married to one of my closer friends from that church, who's also an elder at that church, and he's probably the most zealous, ridiculous one at that church. He legitimately scares me. And she follows in suit. She's a good housewife, but she was also like a graphic designer and kind of a creative. And so her and I kind of connect like as far as like friendship goes. She still follows me on Instagram on my personal page. Yeah. And I still follow her, and she still posts, all these hardcore evangelical stories. But at the exact same time, I know for a fact her husband told her stop following me, and that she had to block me on Facebook.
Really?
But she didn't block me or anything. She still follows me on Instagram. So that sort of thing makes you wonder, is she still trying to like, is she trying to pull me out of the fire? Is she trying to still make sure that I have some sort of like wavelength of truth or something coming from her?
Oh yeah.
She doesn't strike me as that type of person. She never did. She was never that disingenuous. Never was. And she was one of the kindest people I knew of. And she was very, very bold. Which again, because I know I'm almost certain her husband told her to block me. Or that, or he blocked me on her account himself.
Yeah. Wow.
Because that's the type of controlling situation you have in that church. Bad. Yeah. But nevertheless, like she doesn't really communicate with me very much. I think the last time she talked to me was a little bit over a year ago. She's like, I want to see more bird pictures, please. And not my, and that was back when I was still doing my Devos on there. So I guess she might have muted me or something. I guess that's possible too. But so there's that person. I've had a couple conversations. One of my best friends, he unfollowed me he unfriended me on Facebook. Haven't talked to him since. That was pretty sad. He's, I guess he's your age. Single, super awesome guy. He's given up on marriage.
So we have a lot in common, me and that guy.
Oh, jeez. Well, he intentionally gave up on marriage because he doesn't think he's going to be able to find a woman who's going to be able to go to his church, and which he's probably correct. Yeah, and so he literally gave up on that because of church. And that's just incredibly saddening to me. My other good friend, he stopped. I unfriended him because he wouldn't stop messaging me, and he's like a hardcore Trumper. They're all hardcore Trumpers in that church. Really, they were until he lost, and now the whole government's rigged, and the only thing they're going to listen to now is Newsmax. Once Fox News
abandoned Trump. Crazy?
So they're all
It's
on
crazy.
Parler
Like,
to listen to Newsmax.
yeah, Fox News was the one outlet. Like, this is the one we listen to. All the other ones are owned by the left, the liberals, and now Fox News is like the enemy for them. So they're migrating to Newsmax and O&M and the Trump network and or whatever.
Right.
You know, I'm sure Trump will come out with his own social media platform soon, which is going to be very scary and cultish.
I can't wait.
I really think that's going to happen.
I do talk with some people from my church, and so I talk with a few of them regularly. My best friend, his name's Caleb. I'm hoping to do an IG live with him sometime. He goes there, but he's not an evangelical. He's a really cool cat. He still goes there for, I think, for social purpose. I don't want to put words in his mouth because he's probably going to be watching it. So, Caleb, I'll let you explain yourself when I do my IG live with you, my friend. But him and I had some amazing, deep conversations, and he's a humanist through and through, and I love it. He'll straight up tell you he believes it because of faith. That's it. And he likes a lot of my posts, so that tells you anything. So there's one guy I listen to. He's a pastor. And he's still very much a hardcore evangelical, but he's willing to have the conversations. Some of the stuff that he's told me has concerned me a little bit, but again, he's willing to have the conversations. He knows about my interviews with some people and like yourself, and so he finds that highly interesting because he was heavily involved in the media world over in Hollywood. And I actually got a meeting up with the young adults pastor tomorrow, who is a pretty cool cat. He's a nice guy. He's very open-minded. He's got a pretty good following and on Instagram too. But of course, when you're a pastor at a church of 10,000 people, that's pretty common. So him and I are gonna have some coffee tomorrow. I haven't talked to him in a while, so we'll see how that goes.
That's great, man. I think it's really good to have conversations with people who still believe. It's like we're not trying to completely separate ourselves and like we're better than you kind of thing. I think it's great to have those conversations, especially with the people who are a little more open to having them and more progressive and not so fundamentalist, not agreeing to coffee for the sole purpose of winning you back to Christ,
right.
Kind
and
of
that
thing.
that was dangerous too, because I had a lot of people wanting to have coffee with me.
Oh, I'm sure that's the key word. It's like, let's go get coffee sometime.
And most of them were okay. Some of them were just ambushes, which I expected to happen. But that also kind of made me more angsty because that was when it was all happening.
Mm-hmm.
But as much as I would like to see the church burn, the physical church, not the people, okay, and to see like as Hitchens would agree, like there's
FBI, if you're listening to this, he's talking about the building.
Yes, exactly. I don't think there's any there's no religious organization that can do what a secular organization can't do without the baggage. And so that's my personal opinion. However, I don't see religion going away anytime soon. And if I'm going to be a humanist, I need to try to work with the church where they are and try to say, hey, how can we help you, or how can I help you understand or help you become more humanistic when it comes to your theology? And that's why I try to do. That is ultimately my purpose. I don't straight up and say that all the time, but that honestly is my purpose, is to try to build that bridge. I piss off a hell of a lot of Christians doing that, and I piss off a hell of a lot of atheists. I think my ratio is like about 1 to 5 for every 5 Christians I have to block on my Heretical Theology page. I have to block 1 atheist. Because people can be stupid sometimes, and if they don't listen to reason, then they're not worth my time.
Have you had any atheists tell you that you're not a real atheist? Because I had one tell me that. He said that my God was government just because I said I was going to vote, and that made me not an atheist.
Oh, well, I think I had one person say something like that because he thought, and this was back early Heretical Theology, he thought I was just pretending to be an atheist because I was talking about all this theology, that I was actually trying to get atheists to read the Bible more to become more Christian. Yeah, I'm like, well, I guess I could see a Christian doing that. I mean, I see him do crazier things, but that wasn't what I was doing.
Yeah, they thought you had ulterior motives.
Yeah.
If
I
I bet
I
you,
can't blame the guy for thinking that though, because again, like I said, I've seen Christians do crazier stuff.
if you went back and told Will from 10 years ago that he was gonna eventually be an atheist, how do you think he'd react?
I would try to save that Will.
You've gone down a dark road. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be the same thing for me. I probably would have laughed. Like, yeah, right. Well, not 10
Well,
years ago because I did become an atheist about 10 years ago, but
this is what I love about Facebook memories, though, is because I know exactly what Will from 10 years ago would have said. Like, I talk about atheism in my Facebook post from 10 years ago, from 5 years ago, for what? No,
oh
last
yeah,
year, 2 years ago. It's like, this is where I was, and I love sharing those memories in my stories. Like, it
it's
fascinates
awesome
me.
to watch your own change, to watch your own
Mhm.
growth like that through Facebook memories.
Yeah.
I don't get to experience that because by the time I was really on Facebook, well, I guess that's not true, but I didn't really post a whole lot of biblical stuff or anything in the very early days of Facebook. And around 2010, or 2009, I wasn't a Christian anymore. So I don't really have a whole lot of those memories that pop up on mine. But that's so cool that it does on yours. Man, do you ever miss church, like the community and stuff? Because I feel
No,
like there's definitely you don't like. There's kind of
I
a
miss having friends, but
yeah,
I think that's one just a COVID thing. But
man,
honestly,
that's true.
the people that I hang out with still are people from the young adults group that was like our that became that little niche of people was basically our church when my wife Stephanie was leaving the faith and when I was on my way out of leaving the faith. Like they genuinely cared about me. That pastor who I mentioned earlier genuinely cared about me. And I would ask these hard questions. Like, he's like, I don't know. I'm like, oh crap, this is great. Okay, he's someone who's being honest.
Yeah,
So they know where Stephanie and I are. Some of them don't talk to us anymore, but most of them do. Like my friend Caleb was from that group. A lot of the friends that one of Stephanie's closest friends was in that group. So I do miss the social aspect.
I think
But
that's really the only thing I miss is just the
yeah,
social aspect, the knowing
but
that you're gonna be around those same people every week
mm-hmm,
and kind of that whole thing.
mm-hmm,
But I guess part of it's probably also just getting older. Period. You don't really people kind of go their own ways, and you don't really hang out like that
right,
anymore. At least for me. But
right.
I
It
think
was
about
kind of
that
it's kind of
sometimes.
weird though too. It's like because every single week there was because you had church on Wednesday, or you had church on Sunday, you had church on Wednesday, then you had some sort of like Bible study, or I helped with celebrate recovery, so I helped alcoholics and people who are addicted to different stuff. Like that was one of the things I did every week, helping people out with that. And then there was like your small group where everyone brings in food and you all
Hmm.
talk about the Bible and have fun and stuff. Like it was church just 24/7. It
I
it
know.
was nuts, dude. And a lot of people are like, well, that's just cool stuff. Like, no, this is a church of 10,000 people in the middle of like small town. It's not small, but it's not a big town. Like Melbourne, Florida. Okay, it's this is typical evangelical Christianity, and I think the thing that pisses me off the most is when there's Christians on here like, well, you're just talking about a very small minority group of Christians. Like evangelicalism globally is a small minority group of Christians, but when you're talking about Christianity within America, this is
Yeah.
American Christianity.
Right.
Like,
Yes.
like if you're talking to a Christian, a Protestant Christian in America, this is probably their experience.
Yeah. I have a friend that lives in France, and it kind of blows her mind when I talk about because when she's talking about Christianity, it's completely different from
Mm-hmm.
what I'm talking about. My experiences here, it's
Right.
just fanaticism and fundamentalism. And she's mainly talking about the Catholic Church and stuff, and it's just completely different here. I got a couple questions from Instagram. I was gonna
Oh,
get
excellent.
to. Carissa says, "How do you get your parents to understand that you're a non-believer? Do your parents? I guess they know, and I don't know what your conversations have been with them.
Yeah, and so when I get this question, I'm always trying to. It's good to know the parameters of what you're talking with. So if I'm talking to someone who's in their 20s or 30s, who's already moved out, that's a completely different situation than what you handle this like if they're like a teenager still living at home.
For sure.
Okay, so completely different dynamics here. So if you're an adult living on your own, you're completely independent, they don't need to know. If they don't, it's probably respectful to let them know. So my parents don't like it when I share important stuff on Facebook before they know, which I get. Okay, that's just kind of like a common courtesy thing. Not every person has that type of relationship with their parents. So don't feel like that you're owed anything to tell your parents anything. You're just not. If you're trying to get your parents to understand that you're not a believer, as this question is phrased, then definitely just tell them. Like, be honest. And now again, that's going to be, there's some parameters to work with there. If
There's
you're
a lot
a
of
teenager,
nuances. Yeah.
yeah, if you're a teenager living at home with very extremist Christian or religious parents, that may not be the best tactic. Okay, you need to make sure you stay safe. But if you feel comfortable with your parents, with them knowing this information, be honest with them. Set some boundaries. Be respectful. If they ask you questions, make sure you know your shit as to why you're not a Christian anymore. Because they're going to come at you with the Case for Christ. They're going to come at you with William Lane Craig. They're going to come at you with I'm having a brain fart, with all these different types of books that they're probably going to want you to read. And
that's the questions that I've gotten from people like that is like, what do I say whenever my parents reply with this? Like, they're just scared about how that conversation is going to go. They say, I'm not a Christian anymore, and their parents ask them why or ask them certain things, and then they're like, they don't know how they're going to answer it, and they're going to feel that pressure or that they don't have the right things to say back to their parents when they ask those questions.
And that's why I like the fact that there's like a lot of debates out there. I'm kind of over the debate stuff, but as far as just like learning things, like it's very fantastic to learn stuff, because when I saw that these major theologians were going toe to toe with these atheists and these biblical scholars, I'm like, okay, there's a generally good case to be made for atheism, and not only just a good case, but obviously I'm an atheist for a reason. Yeah. And I think with Christians, they think it's like duh, this person's saying this, so it must be true. Like it's done and over with. Like case closed. Like no, it's not. Like it's not that simple. It's not that simple at all. And so the person who asked this question is, they don't need. Well, I'm going to be careful how I say this. If you can get them to at least respect your decision, they don't have to agree with your decision, but that you can get them to respect your decision, and you are also acting respectful in return. Don't be angsty like I was. Okay, that will get you really far. Okay, and if you're an adult, then if they can accept that, then that's unfortunate. My parents were very understanding, but then again, I'm also kind of a special case because I was the fundamentalist of the family. I didn't go to the same church my parents went to. My parents wanted me to go to the college church because they actually had a really good youth group. Okay. So they know better, and my brother, they all know better than to try to argue with me about this stuff. Like when Jehovah Witnesses came to our door, so when I was 15, I think it might have been 14 or 15 years old, when Jehovah's Witnesses would come to our door, my mom would be like, hold on one second, my son's upstairs. And she would just call me downstairs. I would just debate these people. So there were like one guy who's like 30 or 40, and one other guy being trained. And I would debate this. And eventually I was like getting the younger guy to ask the older Jehovah's Witness guy questions. And that was it. Like it was over with. Like okay, thank you so much. They would never come back. And it was very sad. Yeah.
Let me get the kid.
Yeah.
Love that, dude.
Yeah. So little side story there, but yeah, just be safe, be respectful. If you feel like you would actually be injured or hurt or be in some sort of trauma by opening up to your parents like that, don't do it. Open up to someone else who's an adult that you trust, and go from there. And definitely try to seek someone who is a counselor in that regard. So there's a lot of awesome counselors who are also atheists who deal with deconstructing on Instagram. Recovering from Religion has awesome resources, and that would probably be a better resource for this person to contact.
Yeah, that's well said, man. I think it's true. yeah, if you're still living under their roof and you can't move out or whatever, and you just have to really think about how that conversation is going to go and how they'll react, because you'll most likely know to a degree how they would react. But if you're an adult and you're not living with them anymore, I feel like you don't owe it to them necessarily to tell them. And if they don't understand, then that's just sorry, they don't understand. You have to get to a point where you're living for yourself and not really to appease other people, even your parents.
Right. And I will say, if this is a younger person, or if you're a younger person who is an atheist or a questioning Christian who's being forced to go to church, go to the church service, learn some things. It was, so I had stopped going to church for about 6 months. We were still going to like the young adults group there for a little bit, but it was still several months before I stepped foot into a church. And I was a full-blown atheist at this time. I went to a Christmas service. This was my last time at church. It was so eye-opening. Just since I had already deprogrammed, I learned so much more. I was able to like listen to every single Bible verse, every single thing that pastor said. Great, super compassionate guy, but he says so many things are just complete bullshit. It's like, and even I didn't even realize how much was being said. So, if you're no longer a Christian or you're questioning Christian, take notes. Take all the notes you possibly can. If you read a Bible verse and it's in one story, and there's another gospel that has the exact same story, compare and contrast. Those we call that horizontal reading. Ask all these questions: who, what, where, when, why. Do that, or ask why would this person do this. Ask all these questions, and that way, when your parents ask you, like, "Hey, what do you think of the sermon?" And especially if you've already kind of told them you're kind of struggling, you can say like, "Well, I had these questions, and this is why." And that will at least hopefully, the parents might defer you to the pastor or some sort of elder like that, which may be better, may be worse, but at least shows that you're trying to pay attention and you're trying to listen.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Asking questions, that's where it's at. And if they don't want to answer it, you might be getting somewhere.
Yeah.
So here's another question. How do I navigate leaving/deconstructing with a very Christian husband and young kids in the mix? Now, I know that you don't have kids, and I don't either, but maybe we can address the partner part.
So I mean, I can bullshit all I want about this, but the truth is, my wife and I do not have kids. We're a childless family by choice. And 2, my wife deconstructed before I did. And just being completely honest, I am probably the last person, one of the last people who'd be qualified to answer this. I would highly recommend who's a good. I'm trying to think of someone on Instagram. So Phil Drysdale might be a good person to ask about this. I guess I can comment a little bit about it because my wife. So okay, I'm going to take that back a little bit. I can at least tell you from the other perspective, because I pretty much concluded my wife was an atheist while I was still a Christian, and so take this with a grain of salt. So how do you navigate leaving discretion? So when I was when I knew my wife was exiting, it was very concerning for me. It was very sad. One of the things that I loved about my wife the most was hearing her sing worship at church services. And she had stopped doing that for a couple months, and it was heartbreaking. I remember going to the church service wanting to hear my wife sing, just to hear her sing, because she seemed so happy doing that, and she did it, and it was heartbreaking for me. But I had come to terms like, well, I guess I'm just going to be that Christian husband who has a non-believing wife. And I had come to terms with that. It didn't affect my love for her. It didn't affect my care for her at all. If anything, it increased it, because I wanted to understand my wife better.
But there was still a little bit of like sadness, or like that you kind of wish that you were hoping that she would stay and worship God the way that you were and stuff.
Right. And so it was a little self-serving, because I wanted her to feel better because it made me feel better. Like, let's just be honest about that. Yeah. But hopefully you can have that conversation with your spouse. When you have kids in the mix, I'm not even going to touch that, because I spent way too many years as a camp counselor literally indoctrinating children into Christianity. And so I don't like when minors ask me questions. If when I know someone who's underneath someone else's roof and they're asking me all these questions, like I almost feel bad because I don't want to counter what some other parent is teaching these kids.
Right.
I want them to ask questions, but I'm very cautious. I'm like, I just really don't like it.
I'm the same way. Yeah, those are tough waters to navigate for sure.
Right. So hopefully that helps. Maybe you can get with your husband and be like, can you just love me for who I am? And hopefully he does. I'm going to be making a post about the day I broke my wedding vows. And so if you're all listening, I don't know when I'm going to post this, but it's God was all throughout both of our wedding vows. And, I felt like I had to break my wedding vows when I became a non-Christian. And I still had to love her when I felt like she broke hers. So if there's anything that this person can glean from that, hopefully that answers the question.
Might be too personal, and we can cut it out if so. But are you guys like rewriting your vows or planning on any sort of like secular vows or anything like that? No,
I don't think so. My wife and I love each other. We don't even have. We're very non-traditional. Like we had wedding rings, and we lost a lot of weight. None of the wedding rings didn't fit, and then we bought like $20 like rubber silicone rings because we went to the gym a lot. And mine broke over a year ago. I haven't worn a wedding ring in over a year. It's just not like that. I don't know.
Yeah, we're very traditionalists. We live in a very traditionalist society, that's for sure.
Yeah,
and it takes a lot to break away from some of that sometimes.
Right. Might be a good idea though one day for some anniversary.
Yeah. I guess we'll get to one more question. I'm not going to hold you up for too long, especially because we had the technical delays to get started.
I'm open to that, so I
Okay,
have
cool.
my iPad still has 60% battery power, so we go over there 4 hours probably.
Ray asked a question: if the morality of the Bible is fundamentally flawed, should we study theology at all?
I mean, you're asking an atheist. So first off, I can never get over my own irony of being an atheist studying theology. Okay, there is a purpose to it. I think it goes over a lot of atheist heads. Sometimes I even ask myself why, and so I get it. But again, my purpose is not to study theology because I believe there's a God, that's what theology is the study of God. But I study it because I study it like as if I was studying like the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or I'm studying like a Star Wars canon. Okay, I look at it from that perspective. And if you've never had an argument or heard an argument between two Star Wars characters or fanatics about what's canon and what's not canon, or who was good, who was evil, like it gets fucking ridiculous really quick. Okay. And it's very like that has helped me understand how to navigate the Bible a lot. I can now look at it completely from a third person perspective. I know what it's like to have lived these things. It's fascinating because I can flip a switch. I can turn on Christian Will and I turn him off really, really quick. I know exactly what Christian Will would have thought just 2 years ago when he was kind of a more liberal Christian. And I know what he would have thought 10 years ago as fundamentalist, right-wing, extremist cult will. And I can tell you my atheist perspective on it. When it comes to specifically with the morality, is it fundamentally flawed? I mean, that's kind of a loaded statement. I think it is for multiple reasons. But there's also some moral things in the Bible that I think is generally good. I can't think of it right off the top of my head. That might be an interesting post to do. But I do remember there being some. Like I think like the Beatitudes is pretty good. It's not the best, it's flawed, but considering it was 2,000 years ago, like it wasn't horrible. Like it was a pretty good stepping stone for humanity to go forward. Hey, love people like you love yourself. Not bad. I think we should love people more than ourselves. That would be better. We should love
Yeah.
people how they want to be loved, not how we expect them to be loved. So it's not perfect, but it was a good place to start, and I don't mind giving that amount of grace to the Bible. This is what separates me from a lot of atheists, because a lot of atheists would just say the whole entire Bible is bullshit. I'm like, well, that is bullshit, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of horrible things in the Bible, but just like how you can read Homer or the Iliad or any of these other ancient texts, like there is a lot to be learned.
Hmm.
Is it true? Like, probably not. Is it factual? Probably not. But we can still look back 2,000 years ago and see what people believed and why. And if we can understand that, if an atheist is willing to actually learn those sort of things, if we can understand that and show fundamentalist evangelical Christians, like, hey, this is why they believe these things when you apply historical context. We know this to be complete bullshit. Okay, and that's probably where the atheists are actually coming from. So if these things are all bullshit, then why do you still believe this? And if we can ask them those questions in a way that they can actually relate to, we might find ourselves, atheists, humanists, secular humanists, might be able to find ourselves in much better standing with the church at large, and that will be better for humanism, altogether. Again, it goes back to my statement before, is like, I don't think we're going to see the church, be gone anytime soon, but we can help correct a few things if we're patient enough to do our due diligence and try to communicate with them correctly.
It's kind of like trying to build a bridge instead of be so like anti-church, anti-everything, and like try to like make this wall between believers and non-believers.
Right, exactly.
I like what you said about like Christian Will, like the different versions of yourself that you can sort of like pull out every now and then. And I think that is so helpful to other people,
Mm-hmm.
that you have that ability to kind of think back to how you would have reacted back when you were a fundamentalist or when you were a more progressive Christian, and now that you're an atheist, like you have all these different perspectives that you can offer, and it's super helpful.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's also kind of frustrating too, because there's a lot of atheist memes out there that just irritate the piss out of me.
Oh my God, me too. I made a video about
yeah, and like, well, I mean, that sounds good, but unless the Christian you're talking to is a complete idiot, like, that's not a good argument.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of atheist stuff. I'm just like, okay, that's fun. That was humorous, but it's kind of weak.
It's very abrasive and not really. A lot of it's very abrasive and not really doing anything worthwhile or positive.
Right.
Just like you're stupid, or like especially when they use the term religitard and stuff. Like I hate that so much.
Hate that, definitely.
It really drives me insane.
I call them on that too. Like, there was one that I saw today that kind of irritated me. Like, I think it was Richie Garvis. I think that's his name, Ricky Garvis. And God can either do something about it, or he doesn't do anything about it because he's not there, or he doesn't care. It was something like that.
Oh yeah,
And
like the tweet that he made or whatever.
Yeah,
either this and that.
Right, and so it puts it in three different options, and three options only. I'm like, well, that's not the only three options. And Christian would have said, like, well, those three could be true, or he has something better for us in the future, and there's just things we don't understand. Now, again, I do think that's a bullshit statement, and I have various reasons for that. But as long as we keep on, it's just like Christians using this C.S. Lewis's Lord, Liar, Lunatic thing. Okay, that's an okay argument, but it's not a good argument. Like, it's fallacious. Just like this atheist perspective, like, it's not. It's interesting, but it's not the end all argument. And I really wish atheists would apply that type of critical thinking to their own post. Now, of course, my counter would be like, well, yeah, it's convenient that God always has something better in the future, but if you actually look at the Bible, when we're talking about Israel, going into exile for 70 years, and God has something better for you. Well, turns out he didn't. The temple was actually a lot worse.
Yeah.
Okay, and it didn't get any better for Israel. They literally became the Jews because they had one land, Judah. They went from 12 to 1, and then they would be occupied by more people over and over again. First the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans, and then Jerusalem was destroyed. So, not that anyone actually cared about to hear that, but it's just like one quick example of like.
We always care to hear about it, Will. We want to hear about it.
Sorry, but it's just annoying, and I think we need to. I don't know, just a little more creative, critical thinking, and
it's all about
less memes.
Yes, critical thinking, and I'm guilty of making memes too. But like critical thinking, conversations instead of finger pointing and like you think this, you believe this way, and that's why you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't really do much.
Right.
And I like that you bring up Ricky Gervais because it's like people. That's one big difference between atheists, secular humanists, whatever, and religion is like we don't have leaders.
Mm-hmm.
We can call out Dawkins, anybody, you can call them out on their bullshit, and it's not like so like a hierarchical how Christianity is, like the pastors and all that stuff. Like it's a lot easier just to be like they're not necessarily right. Atheists have their own perspectives on things, but it's not like there are these necessarily authorities or leaders in atheism because It's not a religion.
Right. And don't get me wrong, I love Ricky Gervais. Okay, sorry, thank you for saying that. But he says a lot of really great stuff, and and it was that type of question that originally got me thinking. So we do need those things, but it can be a little frustrating when atheists think, well, that's the end of the conversation.
You should watch, if you haven't, on YouTube, the conversation between Ricky Gervais and Russell Brand. It's really good because Russell Brand he thinks that there is something higher. He thinks that he believes in God to some degree, but it's a really cool conversation that they have.
Okay.
And also, I don't know, have you ever seen The Invention of Lying, the Ricky Gervais movie?
I don't think so.
It's really cool because nobody can lie in this movie, and he's the first person. I'm not going to spoil it, but that's in the title of the movie. So he's the first person that can actually lie. And he, like, somebody's dying, and he tells them that they're going to go to heaven because they're like scared of death. And he's like, well, don't worry, there's an afterlife, and it's going to be happy. And that's like the first lie told. And then it starts this whole like religion, and people are asking him the questions about the afterlife and stuff. It's a really good movie. I think you should. You probably get a kick out of it.
Invention of Lying?
Invention of Lying. It used to be on Netflix. I don't know if it is anymore, but
I'll have to check it out.
It's a good one for sure. So your Instagram account, what do you got? 8 million, 9 million followers now?
Oh, come on.
It's growing like crazy. I love it, man. I love your stuff. Do you have any particular plans for the future of what you want to do as far as Instagram or beyond or anything like that?
I definitely want to stay on Instagram. I like it. I don't want to get into YouTube. I don't want to get into monetization. I've had a lot of people ask me about merchandise and stuff like that. It's just not my thing. I know you have an awesome Patreon, and I did actually check that out last week. So go check his Patreon. So I checked out for myself as well. I liked how they have merchandise that they basically create for you, and they handle all the shipping and stuff. So that sounds pretty cool. But for me personally, man, like I'm already like I need to back off a little bit. Okay, and I've had about at least half a dozen people already say like, "Hey, I want to send you money. Like I want to buy a cup of coffee." I'm like, I literally do this for free. I appreciate it. It's not in the works right now. No, donate to Habitat for Humanity or something like that.
Yeah.
But for me, doing a Patreon and doing more for people who are already subscribing, that just seems like more work for me personally. And I like going at my own pace, but it's good to have those followers and the supporters. I would like to grow my Instagram more, maybe. Having 10,000 followers was kind of cool, mostly just because I can put links in my stories.
I'm trying to get there, man.
I know.
It's a crawl for me.
I want to do more Instagram live chats with people.
Yeah.
There's about 3 Christians I want to have on. One of them being my friend Caleb. And I talk about another really cool gal who I got to meet up with this weekend. It's a friend of my wife and I's. I've actually only met her twice in person, but we've talked a lot. And she's a runner and an actress and very much a humanist. But I want to have these conversations so that the hardcore right-wing evangelical Christians can see that, hey, I understand you probably think that this person's not actually a Christian, but I'm letting you know that they love people and they call themselves a Christian, and here is why. Okay, it's your worldview can grow. It's not just either Christian or atheist. Like there is a lot of gray area to work with within theology. And if you truly believe your God is as big as what you say he is, then chances are there's a couple of things that you're missing out on that you may have overlooked, or humanity has flawed a little bit through the 2,000 years of the making of the religion.
Yeah, you made a good point there, because I experienced, and I know you do too, Christians telling us that we were never Christians and stuff like that. But beyond that, it goes beyond just Christians and atheists, but Christians to other Christians, telling them that they're not really Christians. It's crazy. Like who gets to decide who is actually a Christian and who's not a Christian?
And that's exactly, it's a very authoritarian supremacy sort of thing, and not, and I'm guilty of it. I did it all the time. I would have told myself I was never a Christian.
Yeah, yeah. 2006 Will to 2010 Will, or whatever timeline you have there. Hey, you're not really a Christian.
And I understand the theology behind it. It's just that, is it possible that theology was wrong?
Yeah, that's the whole thing. You have the people who are taking the Bible completely literally and they interpret it their way. King James Version's the only one and all that stuff, or whatever. And they say, well, it clearly says right here that you're not interpreting it the right way. And it creates this huge gray area. I mean, I know you're not on TikTok, but over on TikTok, there are Christians who are calling out other Christians all the time. Like there's a very progressive, like LGBT Christian ministers and stuff over there. And the fundamentalists and them get into it a lot. And I see a lot of that on social media, period, not just TikTok, but everywhere, where they're calling each other out and saying, well, it's because you're not believing the right way. And that's just weird.
Yeah. I'd probably be like, well, you're both are probably right. It does say that. And it does say that.
True. So
you all can reconcile that however you want. It's always frustrating when people say, well, the Bible is clear about this. And every time I've heard a Christian say that on my Instagram page, it was like the most muddled Bible verse ever. But like, you just even got to think about it. It's not clear. Like when you have a text written in the fucking 1st century in Greek, talking about some dude who spoke Aramaic, was translated over hundreds of years. Like, it's not clear at all. It's not. No, it's not. Sorry.
I know. I know you're a Bart Ehrman fan, and I'm still reading Misquoting Jesus. I have this thing where I start like 3 books at once, and I never really finish any of them.
Yep.
But yeah, I like what I'm reading in that book. And I know you have book recommendations on your Instagram, but do you have any like key books that are good for people who are either just, really starting to question things, or?
So yeah, I would have people start with Misquoting Jesus by Ehrman, or Jesus Interrupted. I read them both relatively close at the same time. I'm not gonna lie here. I honestly can't remember the huge difference between the two.
I was gonna say, you forget what stuff is in what book.
Right. Misquoting Jesus was more popular, so I think we're gonna go with that one. But Ehrman is a fantastic author. But one thing that you'll notice real quick is if you've read 2 or 3 of his books, you've read 50% of any other book he's written. Because just by his nature, there's a lot of overlap that he works with.
Yeah.
So those are both excellent. He did a very interesting one about memory. It was called Jesus Before the Gospels, and it just talks about it's kind of a good perspective counter to the Case for Christ, because he likes to say that these are eyewitness testimonies, which they're not. That's first off. But it
Have
he
you read
also
The Case
shows
for Christ,
how
by the way?
no. I honestly haven't. I've
I'm afraid
I've got
to read it because I might get
I've gotten
saved.
I've gotten yeah, right. I've gotten the notes from it, and I've heard him speak. I generally I'll listen to someone give a lecture before I read the book to see if it's even worth my time. And I
Right.
heard
Yeah,
it. I hear the premise. If I hear a premise of a book and if it's wrong, I'm not going to listen to it. And like Case for Christ,
makes sense.
his whole premise is that these are trustworthy eyewitness accounts, and they're not. Okay, Luke was not an eyewitness. Mark was not an eyewitness. Assuming that they actually wrote these gospels. Okay, they
Yeah,
didn't.
a lot of
Okay,
assumptions.
right. Matthew didn't write Matthew. Okay, fantastic. If he was an eyewitness account, he wouldn't have had copied Mark for almost half of what he wrote. He would have given his own personal account.
Right.
John, which probably has the most, arguably has the strongest case for it to be actually written by John, but again, it wasn't. But even it was written 90 AD, in which John, if he was 30 years old when he met Jesus, would have been 90 years old. He would have been dead. And anything, his memory would have been completely shot. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm 35. I can't remember crap that happened 20 years ago. I can't remember half of what happened to me. Half of what happened to me in Iraq. I can't remember names. I can't remember super important details, and that was one of the most important years of my life. So no, these are not reliable eyewitness testimonies.
You would think more of this stuff would be documented during the life of Christ if all this stuff is going on, if all these miracles are really happening, it would be a little more
Possibly,
documented.
yeah, possibly. Yeah, exactly. So yes, Case for Christ is not even worth my time. I would much rather listen to actual Bible scholars about the issue. I would highly recommend people listen to Bart Ehrman's debate with Daniel Wallace. If you are currently a Christian and you think everything I said is complete bullshit, especially if you believe that the Bible is inerrant and flawless, I'm going to tell you right now, Daniel Wallace is a Christian. He does believe, and Jesus was God and all that good stuff. He's also a textual critic. And he has a lecture on YouTube. So I think it's called Was the New Testament Corrupted or something like that. If you just Google Daniel Wallace, it should be one of the first things that pop up, and it's like a 2-hour long lecture. And he gives a super long intro, and he straight up says, is the Bible the mind of God? Absolutely not. And I was so a Christian when I heard that because I heard Ehrman talking on Sam Harris's podcast. I'm like, this guy is full of shit. He can't be right. I need to go find me a Christian textual critic to tell me the truth. Because that's what Christians do, right? They want to find people who they agree with.
Yeah, right.
And my heart just sank when I heard that. Because he was like basically one of the most qualified Christian textual critics out there.
Yeah.
And then when I heard him debate Ehrman, he's debated Ehrman twice. Then that was it. I'm like, okay, biblical inerrancy is no longer a thing.
And then you head down the dark road to atheism.
That's when I head down the dark road. I listened to The End of Faith by Sam Harris. That was very interesting. If you want to get
1,000 books I have that I've never read yet.
That's a good one. I really enjoy. So there's another a female. I don't think she calls herself a textual critic. I think she's just a historian. She is. She has a couple books out, but one's called Revelations. It's not about the book of Revelation. She's actually talking about actual revelations that were happening, in the early church and what they were and what they meant. And it was absolutely fascinating because it talks about how the book of Revelation actually affected history in the early church. So if you're really into like end times and stuff like that and want to get a historical perspective, highly recommend that. Her book, her name
sounds interesting.
Her name is Elaine Pagels, and it's a very short book. It's quite excellent. I'm listening to a book by a professor of Yale. So I'm always talking about this guy. His name is Dale B. Martin. He has an entire so Yale has online open courses, and they have an Old Testament course and a New Testament course. It's not a credit or anything, but it's the actual courses that they recorded in the middle of these classrooms. And so you get like 20 plus 45-minute lectures by these two professors, the Old Testament professors, Christine Hayes. Super fascinating. She pretty much was the one that taught me that, yeah, the Old Testament, I just don't even need to listen to that anymore when it comes to the Word of God. And then Dale Martin, he's awesome. I actually emailed him a couple times back and forth, and he has a book. Yeah, so he does the New Testament course. Everybody, if you have even 5 minutes of a vested interest in the Bible, everybody should watch this course, especially if you're a Christian. It's very eye-opening.
It doesn't cost anything?
No, it's all free. So it's all free. It's on Yale Open Courses. They're also available on YouTube as playlists.
I'll put that link in the descriptions for
highly
anybody
recommend it. It is invaluable. But Dale is Professor Martin. He is a gay Christian, and he's hilarious. He says he was talking about to his class about some sort of marriage issue in the New Testament. I can't remember the context, and he's asking his class a question, and of course it's a theology class, and so he got dead silence. He's like, "Hello, I'm gay. I don't have to worry about this, so I need your guys' opinions." It's like, what? This is a Yale course. Like, this is awesome. He's so funny. I love his teaching. But he's got a book called Biblical Truths. I'm not sure how good it is yet, but I've been wanting to get it for a year. I finally got it for Christmas. Biblical Truths, and it's very heavy, very theology heavy. So if you're like me and you're a theology Bible nut, and you're trying to not deconstruct, but also you're deconstructing because you can't help it, and you really want to try to maintain some sort of form of Christianity, that's what he does. He reconciles. I'm not sure I'm going to agree with him. He's already said a couple of things I do disagree with, but I get it. He reconciles the historical issues with the Bible and how something can still be theologically relevant from the Bible. So it sounds super interesting. It'll be good for me to get his perspective so I can help understand Christians who are more progressive. I can help understand their theology a little bit better. And not just be so biased atheist all the time.
That's awesome. That makes for a better world when we actively try to understand other people's perspectives. Right. I think that's perfectly said.
I was very excited though, because he said a quote in that book, and the introduction itself is like 40 pages. So it's a stupid long introduction. But because what my quote is, theology without history is fantasy. And what I mean by that is, if your theology is not built on historically sound issues or true events, then it might as well just be a fantasy book. Okay, you literally might as well just be worshiping Spider-Man. And that's where I stand on things. And there are some things that are historically relevant that I think Christians can hang their hat up on. There's not a lot, but there is some. Okay, but most of the things that evangelicals believe nowadays is just complete erroneous bullshit, or just incredibly misunderstood history. And it's doing a lot of harm at the worst, and it's just making everyone a little bit dumber at the best,
For sure.
But he said that quote, or something. He basically said the exact same quote in his book. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. All right, I'm on the right page, so this should be interesting.
That is cool. Yeah. I think I found a title for this episode. It's going to be your quote there, probably.
Oh, fantastic. I'll take it.
So guys, make sure you follow Will on Instagram.
Thank you.
At Heretical_Theology. Anything else you want to plug or anything before we sign off?
Yeah, after you get done liking my Instagram page, make sure you go and share something from Jesus Unfollowers page in your stories and tag him in a post and tell him how awesome he is.
Yeah. Make sure you're hanging out with us on Instagram. My DMs are always open. And I know Will's are super full, so be selective. But
yeah,
thanks for hanging out, man. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you on the gram.
Yeah, man. This was a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, dude. See ya.
Bye.